pattern in history has pulled down three empires over the past 5 centuries. In 2025, the United States is moving through the pattern step by step, choice by choice, as if the country were following a script that ended in collapse every time before. In 1590, Spain was the richest empire on Earth. It controlled half of the world's gold and silver. Its armies dominated Europe. Its currency was accepted everywhere. Within 80 years, Spain was bankrupt, a second-rate power that never recovered. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun never set on British territory. The pound sterling served as the global reserve currency. Within 40 years, that empire was gone. The currency failed. Britain became America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union was the rival superpower. Nuclear arsenal, global reach, satellites in orbit. It disappeared in 900 days. Not from war, from economic collapse, 3 times, 3 superpowers, 3 implosions, all following the same sequence. And here's what should scare you. The United States has crossed 5 of the 7 stages. We're not approaching the pattern. We're already inside it. This is the story of how empires die, why they always think they're different, and why the math says we're next. And the shift is happening faster than people want to admit. Before we break down the pattern, you need to see what imperial failure looks like. Not the textbook version, the one stripped of comfort. What it means when a superpower breaks down. Imperial decline doesn't start with invasion or battlefield defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire stretches beyond what it can sustain. Bases in 150 countries, wars on multiple fronts, promises it cannot keep, debts it cannot repay. At first, the slide is invisible. The currency works, the military wins fights, the government makes promises, but underneath the structure is cracking. Resources are misallocated, production shrinks, talent leaves, then acceleration hits, allies hedge, enemies test limits, trade partners look for alternatives, reserve currency status starts to erode, and suddenly the strengths that made you dominant flip into weaknesses. Your currency demanded everywhere comes rushing back home. The shift becomes unmistakable as pressure builds through every part of the system at once. Your military stretched across the world becomes impossible to sustain. Promises once backed by strength turn into empty claims. This isn't speculation. It's exactly what happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it happened because they made the same choices being made now. They believed their power was permanent. They pushed their militaries past the limit. They debased their currency. And they refused to confront reality until collapse was already underway. To see the pattern clearly, you need to look at how it unfolded the same way 3 separate times. The first global empire sets the template. Spain in the 1500s and 1600s. After Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, Spain became the world's first true superpower. They crushed the Aztec and Inca empires and seized the richest gold and silver deposits ever discovered. By 1550, Spanish ships brought home around 200 tons of silver each year. By 1600, that number exceeded 400 tons. Spain controlled Europe's money supply. The Spanish real served as the global reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver. And this is where the pattern starts. With a nation that dominates the world's money and believes that advantage makes it untouchable. King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, held more wealth than any monarch in history and poured it into expansion. Stage 1, military overextension. Spain fought everywhere at once. Against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England at sea, and in simultaneous campaigns in the Philippines and the Americas. By 1580, Spain had military commitments across 4 continents. The cost was crushing. Half of all state revenue went to the armed forces, and it still wasn't enough. Stage 2, currency debasement. The Spanish crown couldn't fund its obligations through taxes alone, so it used the oldest tool of failing empires. Debase the currency. They mixed increasing amounts of copper into silver coins. Money that was supposed to be pure turned half copper, then 3/4 copper. The face value stayed the same, but the real value imploded. By 1600, Spanish coins contained almost no silver. Merchants refused them at face value. Inflation exploded. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Spain borrowed endlessly from Italian bankers, German bankers, anyone willing to extend credit. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, the empire crashed into bankruptcy. They defaulted, renegotiated, and immediately borrowed again. They went bankrupt in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Every time they promised discipline. Every time they returned to the same reckless spending. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Here's what most people never understand about Spain's fall. Unlimited wealth destroyed them. With endless silver pouring in from the New World, the incentive to produce evaporated. Why farm when imports are effortless? Why build ships when foreign craftsmen can do it? Why innovate when you can simply buy someone else's work? The nobility rejected labor as beneath them. Industry declined. Agriculture stalled. And as production collapsed, consumption exploded. The treasure hauled from the Americas flowed straight back out for French wine, Italian textiles, Dutch manufactured goods. Spain became a conduit. Riches passed through, but none stayed. By 1600, domestic production had nearly disappeared. The empire depended on imports for almost everything and relied entirely on silver to pay for it. And when the mines slowed and shipments shrank, the entire structure buckled. Stage 5, social decay. As the economy deteriorated, crime surged. Madrid's streets filled with beggars. Ambitious citizens fled. Intellectuals, merchants, skilled workers moved to France, England, the Netherlands, nations rising while Spain rotted. What remained was a state filled with soldiers, clerks, and clergy. Producers gone. Consumers everywhere. By 1640, Spain lost Portugal. By 1650, they lost the Netherlands, their wealthiest possession. By 1700, the empire existed only on maps. In reality, it was economically dead. The nation that once dominated the world had fallen to second-tier status in a single century and never returned. Modern Spain is a pleasant European state, cultured, peaceful, and irrelevant on the world stage. The descendants of the conquistadors preside over a tourist destination. This is what imperial decline actually looks like. Now move forward 300 years. Britain in the 1900s, the empire on which the sun never set. At its peak, it controlled a quarter of the planet's landmass and 400 million people. And its currency, the pound sterling, served as the world's reserve currency. Every major trade agreement was written in pounds. Every central bank held British debt. London operated as the financial center of the world. And just like Spain 3 centuries earlier, Britain assumed its dominance would last forever. But the pattern was already underway. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain carried military obligations across the entire globe. India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. They were defending positions on 6 continents. The cost was enormous, and when World War I erupted in 1914, Britain faced a brutal choice. Stay out and watch Europe destroy itself, or intervene and bleed the empire to win. They chose to fight. World War I cost Britain more than $40 billion. In today's value, about $1 trillion. They borrowed heavily, mainly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions. The global creditor had become the debtor. They had won the war, kept the empire, and believed they could recover. They were wrong. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The pound sterling was supposed to be backed by gold, but the war drained Britain's reserves. Gold shipments crossed the Atlantic to pay for food, weapons, and supplies. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves were half of what they had been in 1914. Still, they attempted to preserve the pound's prestige. In 1925, Britain reinstated the gold standard at the pre-war rate. The flaw was obvious. The pound was overvalued. Exports became too expensive. Factories slowed. Unemployment surged. And to defend the currency, interest rates had to stay high, strangling the domestic economy. By 1931, the system collapsed. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost a quarter of its value overnight. The world's reserve currency had admitted it could not keep its promises. Stage 3. The debt spiral. Britain never recovered from its World War I debt. Then World War II began, another $120 billion in costs, more borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed the United States and Canada more than $30 billion, more than the nation's entire GDP. The Allies won the war, but Britain's empire was finished. They could no longer defend the empire. They could no longer fund it. They could no longer sustain it. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1947, Britain surrendered India, the crown jewel and its greatest source of wealth for 200 years. Over the next 2 decades, the rest fell away. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, gone. By 1970, the British Empire survived only in archives and memory. Stage 5. Currency collapse. The pound kept falling. In 1940, 1 pound equaled $4.03. By 1950, $2.80. By 1970, $2.40. By 1980, a pound bought barely $2.30. Today, it hovers near $1.27. The reserve currency of the world had shrunk into a regional instrument. Britain tried to maintain the facade. A permanent UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons, the special relationship with America. But the truth was unmistakable. They were a former power, a museum of what used to be strength. The empire was gone, and it never returned. Now move to the most recent example, the Soviet Union, 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the USSR emerged as a superpower. nuclear weapons, a massive military, control over Eastern Europe, achievements in space, and absolute confidence in its destiny. Communism would surpass capitalism. The Soviet model would dominate. For 45 years, they challenged the United States, matched American forces, built more tanks, more missiles, more troops. But beneath that display, the foundation was rotting. Stage 1. Military overextension. The USSR poured 15 to 20% of its GDP into the military, triple America's share. They had to match American technology, American alliances, American global reach. But their economy was a fraction of the size. They fought in Afghanistan, they subsidized Cuba, they armed Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Anywhere the United States had influence, they felt compelled to counter. The cost was unbearable. Stage 2, economic stagnation. Soviet growth stalled in the 1970s. Oil revenue kept the government alive, but nothing else worked. Factories produced low-quality goods. Agriculture collapsed. Technology slipped decades behind. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was importing grain. A nation with vast farmland couldn't feed itself. Why? Because central planning suffocates production. Because innovation dies under control. Because output collapses when incentives vanish. Stage 3, currency collapse. The ruble was never a real currency. It couldn't be exchanged internationally. Even Soviet citizens distrusted it. They used dollars whenever possible. The government had to purchase foreign goods with oil and gold because no one in the world wanted rubles. By 1985, oil prices collapsed. Soviet gold reserves were draining fast. They were running out of real money. Stage 4, loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe broke free. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone in a single year. The buffer states that once protected the Soviet Union vanished overnight. Moscow couldn't stop it. They had nothing left to stop it with. Stage 5, total collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. 900 days from the fall of the wall to complete disintegration. No invasion, no decisive war, just internal economic failure. Soldiers went unpaid. Government functions shut down. The ruble imploded. A nuclear superpower with 30,000 warheads collapsed from financial exhaustion. The pattern repeated. Overextension, monetary failure, debt, loss of empire, collapse. And now, here's the part you do not want to face. The United States is moving through the same sequence. Stage by stage. Stage 1, military overextension. The United States operates more than 750 military bases in 80 countries. American forces are deployed in 150 countries. We guarantee Europe's defense through NATO. We defend Japan, South Korea, the Philippines. We fight in the Middle East. We counter China and Russia at the same time. Our military budget is $850 billion a year, more than the next 10 nations combined. And it still isn't enough. We are stretched thin, equipment is aging, recruitment is falling, our obligations exceed our capabilities. If China invades Taiwan, if Russia pushes into NATO territory, if Iran shuts the Persian Gulf, we cannot respond to everything at once. We are overextended, just like Spain, Britain, and the USSR. Stage 2, currency debasement. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became a pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020, more than $6 trillion were printed. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. We are not mixing copper into silver coins. We're just printing unlimited paper. The mechanism is different, but the outcome is the same. Debasement confirmed. Stage 3, the debt spiral. The United States carries $36 trillion in debt, around 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are nearing $1 trillion a year. We now spend more servicing debt than funding the military. We run deficits every single year. $1.8 trillion in 2024, during economic expansion, not crisis. In peacetime, we borrow simply to cover interest on past borrowing. That is the textbook definition of a debt spiral. Spain defaulted 4 times. Britain borrowed itself into collapse. The Soviet Union ran out of money entirely. We are following the same trajectory. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. America no longer builds. We design, we finance, we consume, but we don't produce. The industrial base has been gutted. Factories moved to China, Mexico, Vietnam. We import $800 billion more than we export every year. We depend on foreign supply chains for everything. Medicine, electronics, metals, even military components. Just as Spain relied on imports while silver drained outward, we rely on imports while dollars flow out. And when the money stops flowing, the system breaks. Stage 5, social decay. Trust in institutions has collapsed. crime is rising, homelessness is exploding. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans every year. The most capable citizens are withdrawing, relocating, or disengaging. Fertility is collapsing. Political dysfunction is total. We cannot agree on anything. We cannot fix anything. We cannot build anything. The signs of decay are everywhere, yet everyone pretends it's normal. It isn't. We are deep into stage 5. The Soviet Union reached stage 5 before collapsing. So did Britain. Spain lasted longer, but the pattern was the same. We are not at the end, but we are far along the path. Stage 6, loss of reserve currency status. That is when allies diversify away from the dollar, when global trade shifts into other currencies, when dollars come flooding back home because no one needs to hold them anymore. We are seeing the early markers already. BRICS nations developing alternatives, central banks accumulating gold, China and Russia settling trade in yuan and rubles, Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. The fault lines are forming. Stage 7 is collapse. Not a slow decline, but a sudden break. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existence in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain took longer. The outcome was always the same. When the reserve currency fails, when the debt becomes impossible, when the military can no longer be funded, an empire does not drift downward. It breaks, fast and violently. And every nation that believed it can't happen here ends up learning the same lesson every fallen empire learned. It can, and it does. 3 empires followed this sequence: Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Each believed it was unique. Each believed it was exempt. Each believed the rules of decline didn't apply, and each was wrong, every time. And we are repeating those claims right now. We insist we are different. We have technology. We have global reach. We have the dollar. We have America. But the pattern does not care about national stories. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot spend beyond your productive base forever. You cannot maintain global commitments without the ability to produce. You cannot debase your currency and expect no reckoning. You cannot complete stages 1 through 5 and somehow escape 6 and 7. Once you enter the sequence, it locks in. The only unknown is the speed. Maybe 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. But the pattern points toward collapse. And when the break arrives, it won't be slow. It will be sudden. A currency crisis, triggering a debt crisis, triggering a political crisis. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency shrinks into a regional currency. The empire dissolves into memory. 3 times the pattern unfolded exactly this way. The pattern shows we are next. Since 2020, we have accelerated every stage. We printed unprecedented amounts of money. We expanded our debt. We stretched our military. We weakened production. We fractured society. We are no longer walking the sequence. We are sprinting through it, and the endpoint is visible to anyone who recognizes the cycle. Maybe we will find a way out. Maybe America can accomplish what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union could not. Maybe we will reform, rebuild, recover. Maybe this time truly is different. But the pattern says otherwise. The numbers say otherwise. And history, the same history that watched empire after empire believe it was eternal, says otherwise. If this opened your eyes to where we actually stand in the sequence, subscribe. Because when stages 6 and 7 arrive, you will want to understand what happened and why. The answers are not in the future. They are written in the past, and I'll show you where to look.